Hello and welcome. Today, I'm going to whisper to you about one of the oldest and most fascinating civilizations in human history, the Sumerians. So, get comfortable and let's dive into the ancient world of Mesopotamia, a land nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. It was here, over 5,000 years ago, that the Sumerians built the world's first known cities, developed complex societies, and laid the foundations for many aspects of civilization that we still recognize today. The story of the Sumerians is one of innovation, exploration, and resilience. From the rise of their early city-states to the incredible advancements they made in technology, art, and literature, the Sumerians were true pioneers. They invented cuneiform, the earliest form of writing, created irrigation systems to transform their lands into fertile fields, and built towering ziggurats that symbolized their devotion to their gods. Their influence stretched far beyond the borders of their city-states, shaping the course of history and leaving a legacy that echoes through time. In this journey, we'll explore how the Sumerians not only built a civilization but also left behind the blueprints for empires to come. We'll unravel their intricate social structures, their powerful religious beliefs, and their impressive technological achievements. We'll also delve into the challenges they faced, including invasions and internal conflicts that eventually led to their decline. Yet, even in their fall, the Sumerians continued to shape the region, influencing the mighty empires that rose after them, such as the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. So, as we uncover the secrets of the Sumerians, allow yourself to be transported to a world of ancient cities, towering temples, and the birth of civilization itself. This is the story of the Sumerians, the world's first civilization. The rise of Sumer, early settlements and city-states. The story of the Sumerians begins in Mesopotamia, a region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in present-day Iraq. This fertile crescent, often referred to as the cradle of civilization, became the birthplace of the world's earliest urban societies. The Sumerians, who began settling in the area around 4,500 BCE, gradually transformed it from small agricultural communities into organized city-states, laying the foundations for civilization as we know it today. The early Sumerian settlers were attracted to Mesopotamia because of its rich alluvial soil, deposited by the seasonal flooding of the rivers. This land was incredibly fertile, making it ideal for agriculture, but the region also presented challenges such as unpredictable flooding and the need to manage water efficiently in a dry, arid climate. To adapt, the Sumerians developed sophisticated irrigation systems, constructing canals, levees, and reservoirs to control the water flow and sustain their crops. This innovation allowed them to produce a surplus of food, which became the economic backbone of their society and supported the growth of larger communities. By around 3,500 BCE, small villages expanded into the first known cities, such as Uruk, Eridu, and Ur. Each of these cities functioned as a city-state, an independent political entity with its own ruler, temple, and territory. This system of city-states was a defining characteristic of Sumerian civilization, allowing diverse and thriving communities to develop within close proximity to each other. Each city-state was centered around a large temple complex, often built as a ziggurat, a step pyramid that symbolized the city's religious and administrative heart. These structures were not only places of worship but also centers of economic activity, where priests and officials coordinated agricultural production, managed surplus grain, and oversaw trade. The city of Uruk is particularly significant in Sumerian history as one of the world's first true cities. At its height, Uruk had a population of around 50,000 people, making it the largest city of its time. Its influence extended beyond its walls through trade and cultural exchange. Uruk's ziggurat, dedicated to the sky god Anu, was a monumental construction that dominated the city's skyline, serving as a symbol of the city's religious devotion and political power. The ziggurat also reflected the Sumerians' advanced knowledge of architecture and their ability to organize large-scale construction projects. As Sumerian city-states grew, their economies became increasingly complex. The surplus of food from their agricultural systems enabled the development of specialized crafts and industries such as pottery, weaving, and metalworking. These products were not only used locally but also traded with neighboring regions, as the Sumerians established extensive trade networks reaching as far as Anatolia, the Persian Gulf, and the Indus Valley. The need to manage these growing economic activities led to the development of cuneiform, the world's first writing system. Initially used for keeping records of trade and agricultural outputs, cuneiform became a vital tool for communication, administration, and even literature. It was inscribed on clay tablets using reed styluses, and it laid the groundwork for recorded history. The governance of Sumerian city-states was closely intertwined with religion. Each city was believed to be under the protection of a patron god, and the ruler, often called a Lugal or great man, was seen as the earthly representative of the divine. The Lugal's role was not just to rule but to maintain order and harmony, ensuring that the gods were pleased. The temple priests held significant power, managing both spiritual and economic affairs. They organized large-scale labor projects, such as the building of irrigation systems and temples, and regulated the distribution of resources. The temples were both religious and economic hubs, where grain and other goods were stored and redistributed. While the Sumerians thrived through innovation in trade, their system of independent city-states also led to competition and conflict. As city-states grew in power, they often clashed over resources, territory, and influence. This rivalry fostered the development of organized military forces. Cities built defensive walls and fortifications to protect themselves from attacks, and the role of the Lugal evolved into that of a warrior king who led the army in battle. The earliest recorded conflict, known as the war between Lagash and Umma over a disputed stretch of fertile land called the Guadina, illustrates how these rivalries shaped Sumerian society. Inscriptions from Lagash detail how the city's ruler claimed divine sanction for his victory, establishing a precedent for using religion as justification for warfare. Despite these conflicts, the Sumerians achieved remarkable cultural and technological advances. Their cities were centers of craftsmanship, where artisans created intricate jewelry, pottery, and sculptures. They developed a system of mathematics based on a sexagesimal, base 60 system, which influenced not only their own society but also later cultures. This system is the reason we still use 60 seconds in a minute and 360 degrees in a circle. Sumerians also made advances in astronomy, using their knowledge to create a lunar calendar that guided agricultural practices and religious festivals. The rise of Sumer was a transformative period, marking the transition from small, agricultural communities to complex urban societies with stratified social structures. Sumerian society was hierarchical, with the Lugal and the priestly class at the top, followed by merchants, artisans, and farmers. At the bottom were slaves, often prisoners of war, who worked on large-scale construction projects and agricultural estates. This division of labor allowed for the specialization and efficiency needed to sustain their growing urban centers. The Sumerians also laid the groundwork for later legal and administrative systems. Early records show that they had established laws regulating property, trade, and social behavior. These laws were enforced by city officials and documented on clay tablets. The influence of these early legal codes can be seen in later Mesopotamian societies, such as the Babylonians, who built upon Sumerian precedents when developing their own legal traditions. By around 2900 BCE, Sumer had become a collection of powerful and influential city-states, each competing for dominance yet sharing a common culture, language, and religion. The Sumerians had created a civilization that was not only advanced for its time but also incredibly resilient and adaptable. Their achievements in governance, technology, architecture, and art laid the foundations for future empires and civilizations in the region. The early rise of Sumer is a testament to human ingenuity and the ability to transform challenges into opportunities. From small settlements to thriving urban centers, the Sumerians shaped the landscape of Mesopotamia and, in doing so, set the stage for the development of complex societies. As we move forward, we'll explore the innovations and inventions that further define their civilization and how these advancements influence the ancient world. Inventions and innovations, the birth of writing and technology. The Sumerians are celebrated for their groundbreaking contributions to civilization, many of which continue to shape our world today. Among their most significant achievements were their inventions in writing, technology, and systems that laid the foundation for complex societies. The Sumerians' ingenuity transformed their early city-states into hubs of cultural, economic, and technological advancement. One of the most influential Sumerian inventions was cuneiform, the world's earliest known writing system. Initially developed around 3400 BCE as a method for recording economic transactions, cuneiform consisted of wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay tablets using a reed stylus. This early form of writing evolved from simple pictograms representing objects and goods to more abstract symbols that conveyed complex information. Cuneiform allowed the Sumerians to document agricultural outputs, manage trade, and record temple inventories, which were crucial for the administration of their growing city-states. As cuneiform developed, it also became a medium for literature, law, and historical records, paving the way for recorded history and influencing subsequent civilizations. The significance of cuneiform extended beyond record-keeping. It became a powerful tool for communication and governance, used by priests, merchants, and administrators alike. The ability to document and manage information helped the Sumerians build and maintain their intricate irrigation systems, manage labor, and facilitate trade. Temples, which functioned as both religious and economic centers, relied heavily on cuneiform to track offerings, manage labor resources, and organize large-scale construction projects. This early bureaucracy was essential for the Sumerians to coordinate the activities needed to sustain their city-states and ensure prosperity. Beyond writing, the Sumerians were also pioneers in technology and engineering. Living in a region where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers could flood unpredictably, they developed advanced irrigation systems to control water flow and distribute it to their fields. These systems included a network of canals, dams, and reservoirs that allowed them to regulate the flow of water and prevent both drought and destructive floods. The Sumerians' ability to manipulate their environment in this way not only ensured a stable food supply but also enabled them to expand their agricultural output, supporting the growth of their cities and increasing trade. The development of irrigation technology was closely linked to another Sumerian invention, the plow. The Sumerians were among the first to use plows, which revolutionized agriculture by making it easier to cultivate large areas of land. The earliest plows were simple wooden tools, but they greatly improved the efficiency of farming. By attaching plows to oxen, the Sumerians were able to cultivate fields more quickly and effectively, producing surplus crops that fueled population growth and urban expansion. This surplus was essential for the specialization of labor, allowing some people to become artisans, merchants, and scribes rather than remaining tied to subsistence farming. Another key technological achievement of the Sumerians was the invention of the wheel, which appeared around 3500 BCE. The wheel initially emerged as a potter's tool, helping artisans create pottery more efficiently. This innovation later evolved into the chariot wheel, which had a transformative impact on transportation and warfare. The use of wheeled vehicles for transportation made it easier to move goods and people across long distances, expanding trade networks and facilitating cultural exchange. In warfare, the Sumerians developed chariots, which, though simple by later standards, gave them a tactical advantage on the battlefield. These early chariots were drawn by donkeys and used to transport soldiers and equipment, enhancing mobility and effectiveness in combat. The Sumerians were also innovators in mathematics and astronomy. To manage their complex irrigation systems and measure land, they developed a base 60 sexagesimal number system, which is the reason we still divide time into 60 seconds per minute and 60 minutes per hour today. This system was also used to divide circles into 360 degrees, a convention that persists in modern geometry and navigation. The Sumerians' advanced knowledge of mathematics extended to their architecture as well, as they used mathematical calculations to plan and build their monumental structures, such as ziggurats and city walls. Their interest in astronomy was closely tied to their agricultural needs and religious beliefs. The Sumerians observed the movements of celestial bodies, recording patterns that helped them develop a lunar calendar. This calendar, based on the cycles of the moon, allowed them to predict the best times for planting and harvesting crops. It also played a role in organizing religious festivals, which were tied to the agricultural cycle. Sumerian priests became early astronomers, tracking the stars and planets, and using their observations to create a system that informed both agricultural and religious practices. The knowledge accumulated by Sumerian astronomers laid the groundwork for later civilizations, including the Babylonians, who expanded on Sumerian techniques to develop more complex astronomical observations. In addition to their advances in writing, technology, and mathematics, the Sumerians made significant strides in architecture and construction. The most iconic of their architectural achievements were the ziggurats, massive temple complexes that towered above their cities. These structures, built using sun-dried mud bricks, were designed as platforms to bring worshippers closer to the gods, who were believed to reside in the sky. Ziggurats served both religious and administrative functions, as they were the centers of economic, political, and spiritual life in the city. The construction of these monumental buildings required sophisticated planning and a well-organized labor force, demonstrating the Sumerians' ability to coordinate large-scale projects effectively. The Sumerians also excelled in craftsmanship and art, producing intricate jewelry, pottery, and sculptures that reflected their cultural values and religious beliefs. Metalworking, particularly in bronze, allowed them to create tools, weapons, and decorative items that were not only functional but also symbols of status and power. The Sumerians were among the earliest peoples to use bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, which they used to create stronger and more durable tools and weapons than those made of stone. This advancement gave them a technological edge in both agriculture and warfare, contributing to the success and growth of their city-states. Trade was a central aspect of Sumerian society, facilitated by their technological innovations and the development of writing. Sumerian merchants traveled far and wide, reaching the Indus Valley, Anatolia, and the Persian Gulf. Their trade networks not only brought wealth but also connected them with other cultures, allowing for an exchange of goods, ideas, and technology that enriched Sumerian civilization. The Sumerian religion, gods, temples, and priests. Religion was at the core of Sumerian life, shaping everything from politics to architecture, agriculture to art. The Sumerians believed in a pantheon of gods who controlled every aspect of the natural and human worlds. These gods were seen as powerful, immortal beings who had to be appeased through worship, offerings, and elaborate rituals. The Sumerian worldview was deeply intertwined with the idea that the gods were the ultimate authority, and maintaining their favor was essential for the prosperity of the city-states. The Sumerians were polytheistic, worshipping a wide variety of deities, each associated with natural elements or specific aspects of society. Anu, the sky god, was considered the supreme ruler of the heavens and the father of all gods. Enlil, the god of air and storms, was one of the most important deities, believed to control the wind and weather. Inanna, the goddess of love, fertility, and war, held significant power and was associated with both creation and destruction. Enki, the god of water and wisdom, was revered for his role in bringing knowledge and prosperity through irrigation. Each city-state had its own patron deity, and these gods were believed to protect and guide their respective cities. For example, Nana, the moon god, was the patron of Uar, while Ningirsu, the god of agriculture and war, was associated with Lakesh. Temples, called ziggurats, were the centers of Sumerian religious life. These towering structures were built as step pyramids, designed to elevate the temple closer to the sky where the gods were believed to dwell. Each ziggurat was dedicated to the city's patron deity and served as both a spiritual and administrative hub. The most famous of these was the White Temple of Uruk, dedicated to Anu. Ziggurats were not merely places of worship, they were the heart of Sumerian cities, playing a vital role in the community's economic, social, and political life. They housed priests, stored surplus grain, and coordinated the activities of the city-state. The priests, or Insi, were influential figures who acted as intermediaries between the gods and the people. They were responsible for conducting rituals, making offerings, and ensuring that the gods were pleased. The priests were also in charge of the temple's economic functions, managing the resources of the city-state. They supervised the irrigation systems, organized the construction of public works, and collected and distributed taxes in the form of agricultural produce. The priests were among the most educated members of Sumerian society, often trained in reading, writing, and mathematics. Their knowledge was essential for the administration of the city-state, as they kept records of temple activities, trade, and the agricultural calendar using cuneiform. Rituals and ceremonies were central to Sumerian religion. The Sumerians believed that by performing these rituals correctly, they could maintain balance and harmony in the world, ensuring the gods' favor. Temples were the settings for these ceremonies, which included offerings of food, drink, and valuable goods. Animal sacrifices were also common, as it was believed that the blood of the sacrificed animals carried messages and offerings to the gods. During these ceremonies, priests would chant hymns and recite prayers, invoking the gods' blessings for good harvests, protection in war, and the overall prosperity of the city. Festivals were another important aspect of Sumerian religious life. These events were held to celebrate the gods and mark important agricultural milestones, such as planting and harvest times. One of the most significant festivals was the Akitu, or New Year festival, which honored the god Marduk in later periods and celebrated the renewal of life and the city's prosperity. The Akitu festival included processions, sacrifices, and the reenactment of mythological stories that symbolized the victory of order over chaos. These festivals not only reinforced religious beliefs but also brought the community together, strengthening social bonds and the collective identity of the Sumerians. Mythology played a central role in Sumerian religion, offering explanations for natural phenomena and human experiences. The Sumerians created a rich tapestry of stories about their gods and heroes, which were passed down through oral tradition and eventually written in cuneiform on clay tablets. One of the most famous Sumerian myths is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which tells the story of King Gilgamesh of Uruk and his quest for immortality. The epic explores themes of friendship, loss, and the search for eternal life, reflecting the Sumerians' beliefs about the afterlife and the nature of existence. In these myths, the gods were often depicted as powerful but capricious beings, capable of both benevolence and destruction. The afterlife was an important aspect of Sumerian belief, although their vision of it was far from comforting. The Sumerians believed that all souls, regardless of their deeds in life, descended to the netherworld, a dark and dreary place where spirits wandered aimlessly. The afterlife was seen as a continuation of existence, but without the joys of earthly life. This perspective on the afterlife may have influenced their emphasis on pleasing the gods in the present life, as prosperity and favor in this world were of utmost importance. Sumerian religious practices were also deeply connected to their agricultural society. Since their livelihoods depended on the success of their crops, many of their rituals focused on ensuring fertility and favorable weather. The Sumerians believed that the gods controlled the natural elements and that by appeasing them, they could secure bountiful harvests. Temples often had gardens and orchards that symbolized the fertility of the land and the blessings of the gods. These spaces were not only places of worship but also served as agricultural centers, managed by the priests who monitored the planting and harvesting cycles based on astronomical observations. In addition to the role of priests, there were also temple officials and servants who supported religious activities. These individuals were responsible for maintaining the temple complex, preparing offerings, and assisting in ceremonies. The temples themselves were vast complexes, often consisting of storage rooms, workshops, and living quarters for priests and workers. The temple economy was central to the city-state's survival, as it controlled a significant portion of the land and resources. Temples managed everything from grain storage to the production of textiles and crafts, employing a large segment of the population. This integration of religion and economy made the temple not only a spiritual center but also the beating heart of Sumerian urban life. The Sumerian religion also had a strong influence on the political structure of their society. The king, or Lugal, was often seen as a mediator between the gods and the people, ensuring that divine favor was maintained. Many rulers claimed their right to govern directly from the gods, and they built grand temples and monuments to display their piety and legitimacy. This close relationship between religion and politics allowed rulers to maintain control, as they were perceived not only as political leaders but as chosen representatives of the divine. The importance of religion in Sumerian society extended beyond the city-state, influencing interactions between different cities. Alliances were often formed based on shared religious beliefs, and wars could be justified as battles ordained by the gods. The religious legitimacy of war was a powerful tool for the Lugal, who used it to rally support and resources for military campaigns. In some cases, cities would go to war over the interpretation of religious boundaries or the control of sacred sites, further intertwining religion with politics and warfare. The Sumerian religious system set the foundation for the development of religious practices and beliefs in Mesopotamia. Later cultures, including the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians, inherited and adapted Sumerian deities, myths, and temple practices. The influence of Sumerian religion can be seen in the continuity of ziggurat construction, the prominence of gods like Inanna, later known as Ishtar, and the development of complex temple economies that remained central to Mesopotamian society for centuries. As we continue to explore the Sumerians, we'll look into their economy and trade systems, which were deeply connected to their religious practices and allowed them to build a thriving and prosperous civilization. Agriculture and trade, the economy of Sumer. The economy of Sumer was deeply rooted in its agricultural practices and its extensive trade networks. The Sumerians, living in the fertile region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, developed some of the most advanced agricultural techniques of their time. This allowed them to transform the landscape into one of the world's first highly productive agricultural societies. The surplus generated by these practices supported the growth of their cities and became the backbone of the Sumerian economy, which also extended to long-distance trade that connected Sumer to distant regions. Agriculture was the foundation of Sumerian life, and their success in farming was largely due to their sophisticated irrigation systems. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers flooded annually, depositing rich silt onto the land, but the Sumerians needed to control and channel this water to prevent destructive floods and ensure a steady supply for their crops. They built a complex network of canals, dikes, and reservoirs, which allowed them to direct water to their fields throughout the year. This system required careful management, and it was often overseen by temple officials who organized labor for canal maintenance and regulated the distribution of water. The Sumerians primarily cultivated barley, which was the staple grain of their diet and the basis of their economy. Barley was well suited to the hot, dry conditions of Mesopotamia, and its surplus was stored in large quantities in temple granaries. In addition to barley, the Sumerians also grew wheat, dates, onions, and a variety of fruits and vegetables. They used their knowledge of irrigation to create orchards and gardens around their cities, which provided essential food supplies and created a diverse agricultural landscape. The surplus from these crops allowed the Sumerians to support a growing population and to engage in trade with neighboring regions. Sumerian agriculture also included animal husbandry. They raised cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs, which provided meat, milk, wool, and hides. Cattle were particularly important as they were used for plowing fields, which increased agricultural productivity. Sheep were valuable for their wool, which was spun into textiles and traded both locally and abroad. The Sumerians developed specialized breeds of livestock to suit different needs, demonstrating their advanced understanding of animal husbandry. The production of surplus agricultural goods allowed the Sumerians to support a variety of specialized professions beyond farming. Artisans, craftsmen, scribes, and merchants emerged as key figures in Sumerian society, contributing to the economic and cultural development of their cities. Temples, which were central to Sumerian life, acted as both religious and economic hubs. They controlled large areas of agricultural land, collected and stored surplus grain, and managed the distribution of resources. The temple economy was vital for the functioning of the city-state, as it provided food and materials for both the general population and the laborers who worked on public and religious construction projects. Trade was another crucial component of the Sumerian economy, connecting their city-states to distant regions. Mesopotamia, while rich in agricultural potential, lacked many essential natural resources such as timber, metals, and precious stones. To obtain these materials, the Sumerians established extensive trade networks that extended beyond Mesopotamia, reaching regions as far as Anatolia, the Persian Gulf, and the Indus Valley. These trade routes allowed the Sumerians to import resources like cedar wood from Lebanon, copper and tin from the mountains of Anatolia, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and gold and pearls from the Persian Gulf. These valuable materials were used to create tools, weapons, and luxury goods, which were essential for both everyday life and religious offerings. The Sumerians' trading activities were facilitated by the development of river and sea transportation. They built flat-bottomed boats that navigated the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, transporting goods between city-states and further afield. For longer-distance trade across the Persian Gulf, they used larger vessels that could carry heavier loads, enabling them to transport bulk goods like grain and wool. The Sumerians also established caravan routes overland, where donkeys were used to carry goods through the arid landscapes of Mesopotamia and beyond. These transportation innovations played a critical role in expanding Sumer's trade network and economic reach. Trade was not just about the exchange of goods, it also facilitated cultural exchange and the spread of ideas. Through their trading contacts, the Sumerians shared their technological and cultural advancements with neighboring regions, influencing the development of other civilizations. For example, the use of cuneiform writing for keeping records of trade transactions spread to neighboring peoples, who adapted the system for their own purposes. Similarly, the Sumerians' architectural and agricultural techniques were shared with other cultures, helping to spread knowledge and innovation throughout the region. The Sumerians developed a complex system of trade and commerce, which required efficient management and record-keeping. This led to the further development of cuneiform writing, which was essential for documenting trade agreements, managing inventories, and keeping track of debt and credit. Merchants became a powerful class within Sumerian society, often working closely with temples and rulers to conduct business and maintain the flow of goods. Sumerian merchants traveled widely, sometimes even establishing colonies in distant regions to facilitate trade. These merchants acted as the primary link between Sumer and the outside world, bringing back not only goods but also new ideas and cultural influences. The temple played a significant role in regulating trade. It served as the central hub for economic activity, where grain was stored, goods were exchanged, and transactions were recorded. The temple's authority ensured that trade was conducted fairly, and it often acted as a bank, providing loans to merchants and farmers. These loans were typically repaid with a share of the harvest or other goods. By controlling economic activity, the temples were able to accumulate wealth, which they used to fund large-scale construction projects, religious ceremonies, and the defense of the city-state. Despite the successes of Sumerian agriculture and trade, their economic system was not without challenges. The maintenance of irrigation systems required constant labor and coordination, as canals needed to be cleared and repaired regularly to prevent blockages and flooding. This work was often organized by temple authorities, but it placed a significant burden on the population, particularly during planting and harvesting seasons. Furthermore, the reliance on trade exposed the Sumerians to risks such as piracy and conflicts with neighboring regions. The wealth accumulated through trade and agriculture also led to competition and conflict between city-states, as rulers sought to expand their influence and control valuable resources. The surplus produced by agriculture and the wealth generated from trade allowed the Sumerian city-states to flourish, but it also created a need for defense. As city-states grew richer, they became targets for raids and invasions by neighboring peoples. In response, Sumerian rulers fortified their cities with walls and organized military forces to protect their interests. The rise of powerful military leaders, who often controlled both the economy and the army, marked the shift from priestly rule to the emergence of lugals, or warrior kings, who combined religious and military authority. The economic innovations of the Sumerians laid the groundwork for the development of later civilizations in Mesopotamia. Their techniques in agriculture, their use of trade networks, and their methods of economic management were inherited and expanded upon by subsequent empires such as the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. The Sumerians' ability to create a stable and productive economy not only allowed their city-states to thrive, but also set a precedent for the economic structures of future societies. As we move forward, we will explore how the Sumerians organized their society and governance, looking closely at the roles of kings, nobles, and commoners in shaping their civilization. Political structure and society, kings, nobles, and commoners. The Sumerians developed one of the earliest complex societies in human history, with a well-defined social and political structure that supported their thriving city-states. At the heart of this system was a hierarchical organization that placed kings, nobles, priests, and commoners into distinct roles that worked together to maintain the balance and prosperity of their civilization. This structure allowed the Sumerians to create a stable society, administer their cities, and manage both the economic and religious aspects of daily life. In Sumerian society, the ruler of each city-state was known as a lugal, which translates to great man or king. The lugal's power was initially rooted in religious authority, as the Sumerians believed their rulers were chosen by the gods to govern and protect their city. In the early stages of Sumerian civilization, the lugal often worked closely with priests, who held significant influence due to their role in religious ceremonies and temple management. However, as city-states grew in complexity and conflicts over resources and territory increased, the role of the lugal evolved into that of a warrior king who combined military and religious authority to maintain control. The lugal was responsible for defending the city-state from external threats, leading military campaigns, and expanding territory when possible. This military leadership was crucial, as the Sumerian city-states frequently clashed over fertile land and water resources. To secure his power, the lugal often claimed divine support, presenting himself as the chosen intermediary between the gods and the people. He would build temples and monuments dedicated to the city's patron deity, reinforcing his position as both a religious and political leader. The lugal's palace, known as the Igel, meaning big house, was not only his residence but also a center of administration where political and economic decisions were made. Beneath the lugal and the Sumerian social hierarchy were the nobles and priests, who formed the upper class and played essential roles in governance and religion. Nobles were often related to the ruling family or held significant influence through their wealth, land ownership, or military achievements. They supported the legal by managing administrative tasks, leading military units, and overseeing the city-state's economic affairs. The nobles also acted as judges, helping to enforce the laws and maintain order within the city-state. Their position and influence were closely tied to their loyalty to the legal, and they often received land and privileges in return for their support. The priests, or Insi, were central figures in Sumerian society, acting as intermediaries between the people and the gods. They controlled the temples, which were not only religious centers but also economic and administrative hubs. Temples on large tracts of land managed agricultural activities and coordinated trade. Priests were responsible for organizing religious ceremonies, maintaining the temple's resources, and ensuring that offerings to the gods were properly conducted. Their role was crucial, as the Sumerians believed that the prosperity and stability of the city depended on maintaining favor with the gods. The Sumerian temples, particularly the ziggurats, were the centers of both religious and economic life. The priests managed the labor needed for the upkeep of these massive structures and for the maintenance of the city's irrigation systems. This management extended to the temple's role as a bank and storage facility for surplus grain and other resources. The temples, therefore, wielded significant economic power, and the priests often collaborated with the legal and nobles to ensure the efficient functioning of the city-state. The commoners, who formed the majority of Sumerian society, were farmers, craftsmen, merchants, and laborers. They were the backbone of the city-state's economy, working the fields, producing goods, and participating in the construction of public works, including temples and city walls. Farmers were particularly important, as their agricultural production supported not only the common population but also the ruling elite and temple economies. In return for their labor, farmers were provided with protection, land to cultivate, and the necessary tools and seeds. However, they were also expected to pay taxes in the form of crops or labor, contributing to the city-state's wealth and stability. Artisans and craftsmen held a respected position within Sumerian society, as their skills were essential for producing tools, pottery, textiles, and luxury goods. These craftsmen often worked in workshops attached to temples or the palace, where their work was overseen and regulated. Artisans produced items both for local use and for trade with other regions. The Sumerians were skilled in metalworking, particularly in bronze, which they used to create weapons, tools, and jewelry. The demand for such goods supported a vibrant marketplace, where merchants played a critical role in facilitating the exchange of goods within the city-state and with other cultures. Merchants were also vital members of the Sumerian economy, and they often acted as intermediaries between the city-state and distant regions. They organized caravans and expeditions, traveling along trade routes that connected Sumer to Anatolia, the Indus Valley, and the Persian Gulf. Merchants operated under the protection and patronage of the legal and temples, ensuring the safety and success of their ventures. This relationship benefited both parties. Merchants gained access to resources and protection, while the city-state profited from taxes and the influx of wealth and goods. At the bottom of the social hierarchy were the slaves, who were often prisoners of war or individuals who had fallen into debt. Slaves worked in various capacities, including domestic service, construction projects, and agricultural labor. Though they were the lowest class, they played an important role in the economy by providing labor for the maintenance of temples, irrigation systems, and city infrastructure. Slaves were considered property, but they were sometimes able to earn their freedom or improve their status through hard work or the accumulation of wealth. The Sumerian social structure was not only hierarchical but also complex, with each group playing a specific role that supported the overall functioning of the city-state. This organization allowed the Sumerians to maintain order, manage resources efficiently, and respond to challenges such as external threats and internal strife. The cooperation between the ruling elite, the priests, and the common population was essential for the stability and prosperity of Sumerian society. Despite the clear divisions in status and power, the interconnectedness of these groups created a system where each depended on the other for survival. The Sumerian legal system, one of the earliest in human history, helped maintain this social order. Laws were inscribed on clay tablets, and they regulated various aspects of life, including trade, property rights, and interpersonal conduct. These laws, enforced by the legal and the city's officials, provided a framework for resolving disputes and maintaining harmony within the community. The Sumerian legal system set a precedent for later civilizations, such as the Babylonians, who expanded upon these early laws in their own codes, including the famous Code of Hammurabi. The political and social structure of the Sumerians laid the foundation for future Mesopotamian empires. The concept of a centralized authority, supported by a religious and economic elite, was adopted by later cultures, including the Akkadians and Babylonians. These societies built upon the Sumerian model, expanding it into larger and more complex empires that continued to dominate the region for centuries. The Sumerian emphasis on the relationship between religion, politics, and economy also influenced these later civilizations, demonstrating the enduring impact of Sumerian society. As we move forward, we'll delve into the military aspects of Sumerian life, exploring how their approach to warfare and defense shaped their city-states and contributed to their development and conflicts with neighboring regions. Sumerian warfare, conflict, and the rise of empires. Warfare was an integral part of Sumerian society and played a crucial role in shaping the history of their city-states. The competitive nature of Sumerian city-states, combined with their pursuit of resources and territory, led to frequent conflicts and battles. The Sumerians developed sophisticated military strategies, weapons, and fortifications to protect their cities and expand their influence. These conflicts not only defined the political landscape of Sumer but also set the stage for the rise of larger empires in Mesopotamia. The city-states of Sumer, including Uruk, Uar, Lagash, and Umma, often clashed over control of fertile land and water resources. In a region where agricultural production was the lifeline of society, access to and control of irrigation systems were critical. The rivalry between Lagash and Umma over a fertile area known as the Guadina is one of the earliest recorded conflicts in human history. This dispute, documented on clay tablets, shows how essential agricultural land was to the Sumerian economy and how city-states were willing to go to war to secure their survival and prosperity. The leaders of these city-states, often referred to as Ligals or great men, were not only political figures but also military commanders. They led their armies into battle and built fortifications to defend their cities. The Ligals' success in warfare was crucial to maintaining their power, as victories reinforced their authority and often increased their wealth through the acquisition of spoils and territory. The Ligals' role as both a warrior and a ruler became central to the political and social structure of Sumerian society. This dual role allowed the Ligal to consolidate power and expand their influence beyond the boundaries of their city-state. The Sumerians developed various weapons and military tactics to defend their city-states and wage war. Spears, axes, and daggers were common weapons, often made from bronze, which was stronger and more durable than stone. The use of bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, gave the Sumerians a technological edge in both offense and defense. They also developed protective armor, including helmets and shields, made from leather and bronze to protect soldiers in battle. The Sumerians were among the earliest peoples to use chariots, which, although primitive compared to later models, were effective for transporting soldiers and commanders during battle. These chariots, drawn by donkeys, provided greater mobility and a tactical advantage on the battlefield, allowing the Sumerians to execute swift attacks and maneuver their troops more effectively. The Sumerians were also pioneers in fortification and defense. As city-states expanded and became wealthier, they became targets for raids and invasions. In response, the Sumerians built massive city walls to protect their urban centers. These walls, often made from mud bricks, surrounded the city and were reinforced with towers and gates to provide vantage points for defense. The walls not only served as physical barriers but also symbolized the strength and independence of the city-state. Temples and palaces were also fortified, as they were central to the city's religious, economic, and political life. The construction of these fortifications required significant labor and resources, often organized and overseen by the Lugal and temple priests. The Sumerians' approach to warfare was not just about physical conflict, it also involved strategic alliances and diplomacy. City-states would often form alliances with one another, either to defend against common enemies or to expand their influence. These alliances were sometimes based on shared religious beliefs, as city-states with the same patron deity would unite in a sense of divine favor. However, alliances were often temporary and shifted based on the changing balance of power. When alliances failed, city-states frequently engaged in long-term conflicts that shaped the political and military landscape of Sumer. One of the most famous examples of Sumerian warfare and alliance building was the rise of Lagash under the leadership of Eannatum. Eannatum, who ruled Lagash around 2500 BCE, expanded his city-state's territory through a series of military campaigns. He led his armies in battles against neighboring city-states like Umma, which had long contested Lagash's control over the Guadina region. Eannatum's campaigns were successful, and he managed to establish Lagash as one of the dominant powers in Sumer. To commemorate his victories, Eannatum erected the Stele of the Vultures, which depicts scenes of battle and the victory of Lagash. The stele illustrates not only the military might of Lagash, but also the Sumerian belief that their gods played an active role in warfare, granting favor and protection to those they deemed worthy. Warfare among the Sumerian city-states was often brutal and destructive. Cities that were conquered could be looted, and their populations might be enslaved or killed. These conflicts, while damaging in the short term, also led to the consolidation of power as victorious Lugals expanded their territories and influence. Over time, some city-states began to dominate their neighbors, setting the stage for the emergence of larger political entities. The concept of a single ruler controlling multiple cities became the foundation for the rise of empires in Mesopotamia. The importance of warfare in Sumerian society extended beyond the battlefield. It also played a significant role in the political and social organization of the city-states. Military success was a key factor in a Lugal's legitimacy and authority, and the ability to protect and expand the city-state was often seen as a sign of divine favor. The temple, as a central institution in Sumerian society, was deeply involved in military affairs. Temples provided the resources needed for warfare, such as weapons, armor, and food supplies for soldiers. They also served as places where military leaders sought the gods' blessings before going to battle, reinforcing the close connection between religion and warfare. The Sumerians' emphasis on warfare and military power eventually led to the rise of the Akkadian Empire under Sargon of Akkad. Sargon, who rose to power in the 24th century BCE, unified the Sumerian city-states through military conquest. He established one of the world's first empires, expanding his control beyond Sumer and into surrounding regions. Sargon's empire was built on the foundation of Sumerian military tactics, technology, and organization. The rise of the Akkadian Empire marked a turning point in Mesopotamian history, as it demonstrated the potential for larger political entities to dominate and unify previously independent city-states. The legacy of Sumerian warfare continued to influence later Mesopotamian civilizations, such as the Babylonians and Assyrians, who inherited and expanded upon Sumerian military traditions. The use of chariots, fortified cities, and bronze weapons became standard practices in Mesopotamian warfare, shaping the region's history for centuries. These later civilizations also adopted the Sumerian approach to the integration of religion and warfare, using divine justification to legitimize their military campaigns and conquests. The Sumerians' approach to warfare was both a means of survival and a tool for expansion. While it often led to destruction and conflict, it also facilitated the rise of more complex political systems and the consolidation of power. The military innovations and strategies developed by the Sumerians laid the foundation for the empires that followed, influencing the course of Mesopotamian history and the evolution of organized warfare. As we continue our exploration of the Sumerians, we will delve into their cultural achievements, including art, architecture, and literature, and how these aspects of their civilization left a lasting legacy that shaped future cultures. Art, architecture, and literature, Sumerian cultural achievements. The Sumerians were not only pioneers in governance, agriculture, and warfare, but they also made significant contributions to art, architecture, and literature. These cultural achievements reflect the Sumerians' deep connection to their religion, society, and the world around them. Through their artistic expressions, architectural marvels, and written works, they left a legacy that influenced many civilizations to come and set the stage for the cultural evolution of Mesopotamia. One of the most iconic aspects of Sumerian civilization was their architecture, particularly the construction of ziggurats. Ziggurats were massive stepped structures built as temples dedicated to the gods of each city-state. These impressive edifices served as both religious and administrative centers, symbolizing the connection between the heavens and the earth. Ziggurats were made from mud bricks, a common building material in Mesopotamia, and their design often included multiple terraces leading to a shrine at the top. The most famous ziggurat, the White Temple of Uruk, was dedicated to the sky god Anu. Its gleaming white walls, which reflected sunlight, were a visible reminder of the city's devotion to its patron deity. The construction of ziggurats required significant resources and labor, which were organized by the temple and the ruling Mughal. These monumental structures were not only places of worship but also served as centers for economic and political activities. They stored grain, housed workshops, and provided space for important ceremonies. The design of ziggurats influenced later Mesopotamian architecture, including the construction of larger and more elaborate temples by the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. The concept of a tiered temple reaching toward the sky persisted for centuries, highlighting the enduring influence of Sumerian architectural innovation. Beyond religious architecture, the Sumerians also built elaborate palaces and residential complexes that reflected their social hierarchy and wealth. The palaces of Sumerian kings, known as egals, meaning big houses, were grand structures that served as the administrative centers for the legal's court. These palaces were often located near temples, signifying the close relationship between religious and political power. The legal's residence was a place where important decisions were made, resources were managed, and military campaigns were planned. Sumerian houses, although modest compared to the palaces, were also designed with practicality in mind. Built from mud bricks, they featured inner courtyards to provide ventilation and space for daily activities. Sumerian art was deeply intertwined with their religious and social life, and much of it was created to honor the gods or to celebrate the power of the ruling elite. Sculptures, reliefs, and statuettes were common, often depicting deities, priests, and worshippers. One of the most famous examples of Sumerian art is the work of Vase, a carved alabaster vessel from Uruk that shows a procession of offerings to the goddess Inanna. This vase is one of the earliest examples of narrative art, illustrating the Sumerians' ability to convey complex stories and religious rituals through visual means. The Sumerians were also skilled in metalworking, particularly in bronze. They created tools, weapons, and decorative items that were both functional and aesthetically pleasing. Jewelry was another prominent form of art, with intricate designs made from precious metals and stones such as lapis lazuli, imported from as far away as Afghanistan. These items not only showcase the Sumerians' craftsmanship, but also their extensive trade networks, which allowed them to obtain rare materials. Artisans often worked under the patronage of temples or the legal, producing items used in religious ceremonies, as offerings, or as symbols of status. Cylinder seals were another important artistic achievement of the Sumerians. These small, carved objects were used to create impressions on clay tablets or objects, serving as personal signatures, property markers, or decorative elements. Each seal was unique and often depicted scenes of mythology, daily life, or nature. The use of cylinder seals illustrates the Sumerians' advanced understanding of both art and administration, as they served practical and aesthetic purposes. These seals were also a form of security, as they authenticated documents and protected goods from tampering. Literature was another area where the Sumerians excelled, and they produced some of the earliest written texts in human history. With the development of cuneiform, they documented not only economic transactions and administrative records, but also religious hymns, myths, and epic tales. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest known pieces of literature, originated in Sumer. This epic tells the story of Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, and his quest for immortality. It explores themes of friendship, mortality, and the human condition, offering insight into the Sumerian worldview and their understanding of life and death. The Sumerians also composed a rich collection of myths and religious texts that detailed their beliefs and the actions of their gods. These myths, such as the descent of Inanna, describe the adventures and trials of their deities, often reflecting natural events like the changing seasons or the flooding of the rivers. These stories not only explain the workings of the natural world, but also reinforce the power and authority of the priesthood and the ruling elite, who were seen as the intermediaries between the gods and the people. In addition to epic literature and mythology, the Sumerians wrote hymns, prayers, and ritual texts that were used in temple ceremonies. These texts, often inscribed on clay tablets, were recited by priests during religious festivals and offerings. The use of written hymns and prayers helped standardize religious practices across the Sumerian city-states, creating a shared cultural and spiritual identity. The fact that these texts were preserved on durable clay tablets also meant that they could be passed down through generations, influencing later Mesopotamian cultures and ensuring the continuity of Sumerian religious traditions. Sumerian literature and art were not solely religious. They also included practical texts such as proverbs, legal documents, and mathematical texts. The Sumerians recorded wisdom and everyday advice through collections of proverbs, offering a glimpse into the values and norms of their society. Legal texts, such as those detailing property transactions and contracts, reflect the complex economic and social relationships that structured their civilization. Meanwhile, mathematical texts demonstrate their advanced knowledge in fields like geometry and accounting, skills essential for managing trade, construction, and agriculture. The cultural achievements of the Sumerians were closely linked to their education system, which was centered around the Adaba, or tablet house. The Adaba was a school where young scribes were trained in the art of writing, mathematics, and literature. Scribes were essential members of Sumerian society, as they were responsible for keeping records, composing religious texts, and assisting in temple and palace administration. The rigorous training of scribes ensured that Sumerian culture and knowledge were preserved and transmitted across generations, helping to maintain the continuity and cohesion of their society. The impact of Sumerian cultural achievements extended beyond their own civilization. Their innovations in art, architecture, and literature influenced later Mesopotamian empires, such as the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. These cultures adopted and adapted Sumerian techniques, building upon their architectural designs, literary traditions, and artistic motifs. The legacy of the Sumerians is evident in the enduring importance of ziggurats, the continued use of cuneiform for centuries, and the preservation of epic tales like the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was retold and adapted by later cultures. The Sumerians' contributions to art, architecture, and literature demonstrate their sophisticated understanding of the world and their desire to express and preserve their beliefs, achievements, and stories. Their cultural legacy laid the foundation for future civilizations and continues to provide us with valuable insights into the earliest expressions of human creativity and thought. As we move forward, we'll explore the decline of the Sumerian city-states, examining the internal and external factors that led to the eventual fall of this remarkable civilization. The fall of Sumer, invasions, and internal strife. The decline of the Sumerian civilization was a gradual and complex process, marked by both internal challenges and external threats. Despite their innovations and achievements, the Sumerian city-states were unable to maintain their dominance indefinitely. Over time, a combination of political instability, resource competition, and invasions from neighboring regions weakened the Sumerians, eventually leading to the fall of their civilization. This decline, while multifaceted, provides insight into the vulnerabilities of early urban societies and the challenges they faced in maintaining unity and power. One of the primary reasons for the decline of Sumer was the political fragmentation inherent in their system of independent city-states. While the Sumerian city-states shared a common culture, language, and religious beliefs, they operated as independent entities, each with its own ruler, patron deity, and governing system. This independence fostered a sense of rivalry, as city-states frequently competed over resources such as fertile land, water rights, and trade routes. The constant competition led to conflicts and wars that drained the resources of the city-states and weakened their ability to defend against external threats. The long-standing rivalry between Lagash and Umma over the fertile Guadina region is a prime example of how resource competition fueled conflict among the Sumerian city-states. While these conflicts initially demonstrated the military prowess and resilience of the Sumerians, they also highlighted the lack of unity that ultimately left them vulnerable. As city-states expended their resources in battles against each other, they became less able to defend themselves against external invasions or to respond effectively to internal strife. This fragmentation made it difficult for any single city-state to rise to a position of dominance and establish a stable and unified Sumerian empire. Another significant factor contributing to the decline of Sumer was environmental degradation. The Sumerians relied heavily on their advanced irrigation systems to sustain agriculture and support their growing urban populations. However, over time, the intensive use of irrigation led to the accumulation of salt in the soil, a process known as salinization. The buildup of salt reduced the fertility of the land, making it increasingly difficult to grow essential crops such as barley and wheat. As agricultural yields declined, the city-states faced food shortages, which in turn led to economic difficulties and social unrest. The environmental challenges were compounded by periodic droughts and flooding. The Sumerians had developed sophisticated systems to manage water resources, but these systems required constant maintenance and coordination. In times of drought, the reduced water flow made it difficult to irrigate crops adequately, leading to famine and hardship. Conversely, when the rivers flooded, they could cause significant damage to the cities and agricultural lands, further straining the resources of the city-states. The fluctuations in the environment placed additional pressure on the Sumerian rulers, who were expected to maintain stability and prosperity despite these challenges. Internal political instability also played a crucial role in the decline of Sumer. As city-states grew in size and complexity, power struggles between the ruling elite became more frequent. The transition of power from one level to another was often accompanied by disputes, assassinations, and civil conflicts, weakening the political structures of the city-states. In some cases, priests and noble families, who controlled significant economic and religious resources, challenged the authority of the legal, leading to internal divisions. These power struggles not only destabilized individual city-states but also prevented the emergence of a strong centralized power that could unite the region and fend off external threats. The weakening of Sumer's internal political structures coincided with the rise of external threats, particularly from the Akkadians to the north. In the 24th century BCE, Sargon of Akkad emerged as a powerful leader who sought to unify Mesopotamia under his rule. Sargon capitalized on the political fragmentation and weakened state of the Sumerian city-states, launching a series of military campaigns that gradually brought them under Akkadian control. His conquests marked the end of the independent Sumerian city-states and the beginning of the Akkadian Empire, the world's first known empire. Sargon's rise to power was facilitated by his strategic use of military force, diplomacy, and alliances. He managed to build a standing army that was loyal to him, unlike the Sumerian city-states, which often rely on temporary militias composed of citizens. Sargon's military reforms, which included the use of chariots and the standardization of weapons, gave him a significant advantage over the fragmented and divided Sumerian forces. As the Akkadian army conquered one Sumerian city-state after another, the Sumerians struggled to mount a unified defense, and the city-states fell individually rather than as a cohesive entity. The Akkadian conquest of Sumer did not mark the immediate end of Sumerian culture, but it did signify a shift in power dynamics in the region. Under Akkadian rule, the Sumerians continued to live in their cities, and many aspects of their culture, including cuneiform writing and religious practices, were preserved. However, the Sumerian city-states lost their independence, and their political structures were absorbed into the larger Akkadian administration. Sargon's establishment of a centralized government and his control over trade routes and agricultural production allowed the Akkadians to consolidate power and build a more unified and stable state than the Sumerians had managed to achieve. Despite the Akkadian dominance, Sumerian culture persisted, and there were attempts to restore Sumerian independence. In the late 22nd century BCE, the Gutians, a group of nomadic tribes from the Zagros Mountains, invaded Mesopotamia and disrupted Akkadian control. The Gutian invasions weakened the Akkadian Empire, allowing some Sumerian city-states to briefly regain their independence. This period, known as the Gutian Interregnum, saw a temporary revival of Sumerian power, particularly in cities like Ur and Lachish. However, the Gutian rule was marked by instability and decline, as they lacked the administrative skills and infrastructure needed to maintain order in the region. The final revival of Sumerian civilization came during the Third Dynasty of Ur, 2112 to 2004 BCE, often referred to as the Neo-Sumerian period. Under rulers such as Ur-Nammu and Shulgi, the Sumerians briefly re-established a powerful and centralized state that sought to revive the glory of the earlier Sumerian city-states. This period saw significant developments in law, with the creation of the Code of Ur-Nammu, one of the earliest known legal codes, and a flourishing of Sumerian art and literature. The rulers of the Third Dynasty of Ur built ziggurats, reinforced city walls, and expanded their influence through military campaigns and diplomacy. Despite these efforts, the Neo-Sumerian state ultimately fell victim to the same challenges that had plagued earlier Sumerian city-states. Environmental degradation continued to undermine agricultural productivity, while internal power struggles weakened the state's political stability. Additionally, new external threats emerged, including invasions from the Elamites and the rise of the Amorites, who eventually conquered the region and established the Babylonian Empire. The fall of the Third Dynasty of Ur marked the end of Sumer as a major political power, although its cultural and technological legacy endured in the civilizations that followed. The decline of Sumer was not a sudden event, but a process influenced by a complex interplay of environmental, political, and social factors. The inability of the city-states to unite, the challenges of managing their environment sustainably, and the rise of powerful external threats all contributed to the fall of one of the world's first civilizations. However, the Sumerians' achievements in writing, law, architecture, and governance had a lasting impact on Mesopotamia and the wider ancient world, laying the foundation for the empires that would rise in their place. As we move forward, we'll explore the lasting legacy of the Sumerians and how their innovations influenced later civilizations, from the Akkadians and Babylonians to the Assyrians and beyond. The legacy of the Sumerians, influence on later civilizations. Although the Sumerians eventually lost their political power, their influence extended far beyond the boundaries of their city-states, shaping the civilizations that rose after them. The legacy of the Sumerians is evident in various aspects of culture, technology, governance, and religion that continue to impact Mesopotamia and the broader ancient world for centuries. Their innovations in writing, architecture, law, and administration became the foundation upon which later empires built their societies, leaving an enduring mark on human history. One of the most significant contributions of the Sumerians was the development of cuneiform, the earliest known writing system. Initially created to record economic transactions, cuneiform evolved into a versatile script that documented laws, myths, religious texts, and administrative records. The Sumerian writing system was adopted and adapted by subsequent Mesopotamian civilizations, including the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. These civilizations modified the script to fit their languages, allowing cuneiform to become the dominant method of writing across the region. This continuity of writing systems ensured that Sumerian literature, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, was preserved, adapted, and passed down through generations, influencing literary traditions far beyond the Sumerians' time. The legal traditions of the Sumerians also had a lasting impact. The Sumerians were among the first to codify laws, creating a structured system of governance and justice. One of the earliest examples of such a legal code is the Code of Ur-Nammu, established during the 3rd dynasty of Ur. This code set out rules for resolving disputes, regulating property rights, and ensuring social order. The Sumerian approach to law laid the groundwork for later, more extensive legal codes, such as the Code of Hammurabi developed by the Babylonians. The idea of a centralized authority enforcing a standardized set of laws became a cornerstone of Mesopotamian society and was a direct inheritance from Sumerian governance practices. The Sumerians' architectural innovations, particularly the construction of ziggurats, also left a lasting legacy. Ziggurats were not just religious centers, they were symbols of the city's power and devotion to its patron deity. Later civilizations, such as the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians, continued the practice of building these monumental structures, often expanding upon the Sumerian designs to create even larger and more elaborate temples. The ziggurat of Ur, reconstructed during the reign of Ur-Nammu, is a prime example of how Sumerian architectural techniques were preserved and enhanced over time. These ziggurats served as focal points for both religious and civic activities, reinforcing the connection between the divine and the ruling authority, a concept central to Mesopotamian politics. In addition to architecture, Sumerian religious practices and mythology were deeply influential. The Sumerians worshipped a pantheon of gods associated with natural elements and societal functions, and they built elaborate temples to honor these deities. This religious framework was inherited by later Mesopotamian civilizations, who adapted and expanded the Sumerian pantheon to include their own local deities while preserving many of the core beliefs and rituals. For example, the Sumerian goddess Inanna, associated with love, fertility, and war, later became known as Ishtar in the Akkadian and Babylonian traditions. The stories and myths surrounding these deities, including tales of creation and the afterlife, were preserved and adapted by later cultures, demonstrating the enduring power of Sumerian religious narratives. The Sumerians also influenced the political structures of subsequent Mesopotamian empires. The concept of a city-state governed by a powerful ruler who claimed divine authority was central to Sumerian society. This model was adopted by the Akkadians under Sargon of Akkad, who united the Sumerian city-states into the world's first empire. Sargon's rule marked the transition from independent city-states to a centralized empire, yet his governance model was heavily influenced by Sumerian practices. He maintained the tradition of associating the ruler's authority with divine favor, and he integrated the temple economy and administration into the imperial structure, ensuring continuity and stability. The Akkadian Empire served as a template for later empires, such as the Babylonian and Assyrian, which built upon these foundations while expanding their reach and influence. The Sumerians' innovations in irrigation and agriculture also had long-lasting effects on Mesopotamian society. The development of complex irrigation systems allowed the Sumerians to transform the arid landscape into productive agricultural fields, supporting large urban populations. Later civilizations inherited these irrigation techniques, maintaining and expanding the canal systems to sustain their own cities. The concept of centralized water management, coordinated by temple officials or state authorities, became a staple of Mesopotamian governance. This continuity in agricultural practice ensured the long-term viability of urban centers in the region and enabled the rise of larger and more sophisticated empires. In the realm of art and craftsmanship, the Sumerians set standards that influenced subsequent cultures. Sumerian artisans were skilled in metalworking, pottery, and sculpture, producing items for both religious and practical use. Cylinder seals, a Sumerian invention, became a common administrative tool throughout Mesopotamia. These small, intricately carved objects were used to mark ownership and authenticate documents, and their use persisted for centuries. The artistic styles and motifs developed by the Sumerians, including depictions of deities, animals, and mythological scenes, were adopted and adapted by later cultures, demonstrating the Sumerians' enduring influence on Mesopotamian visual art. The Sumerians' advances in mathematics and astronomy were equally significant. Their base 60 sexagesimal number system, used for both mathematics and timekeeping, laid the groundwork for later developments in these fields. The Sumerians' methods of dividing the day into 24 hours and the circle into 360 degrees have persisted to the present day. Their observations of the stars and planets also influenced later Babylonian astronomers, who built upon Sumerian records to develop more sophisticated methods of tracking celestial movements. These mathematical and astronomical achievements were integral to the development of calendars, agricultural planning, and religious festivals, ensuring their lasting relevance in Mesopotamian society. The literature produced by the Sumerians continued to shape Mesopotamian culture long after their city-states lost political power. Texts such as the Epic of Gilgamesh and various religious hymns and myths were copied and adapted by later civilizations, preserving Sumerian stories and teachings. The influence of these works extended beyond Mesopotamia. They provided insight into universal human themes such as mortality, friendship, and the quest for knowledge. The Sumerians' literary legacy not only enriched the cultures that followed, but also laid the foundation for epic storytelling traditions that continued through history. The Sumerians also influenced education and the transmission of knowledge. The Adaba, or tablet house, where young scribes were trained in writing, mathematics, and administration, became a model for educational institutions in later Mesopotamian empires. The scribal tradition established by the Sumerians ensured the continuity of cultural and administrative practices, as scribes documented everything from trade transactions to royal decrees and religious ceremonies. This emphasis on literacy and record-keeping allowed Mesopotamian societies to preserve their heritage and knowledge across generations. While the political dominance of the Sumerian city-states eventually faded, their cultural, technological, and intellectual contributions laid the foundation for the civilizations that succeeded them. The Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians all inherited and built upon the achievements of the Sumerians, ensuring that their legacy endured for millennia. The Sumerians' impact was not limited to Mesopotamia. Their innovations in writing, mathematics, and urban planning influenced other ancient cultures in the Near East and beyond. The Sumerians' ability to innovate and adapt to their environment allowed them to create a civilization that set the stage for the development of complex societies. Their contributions to writing, law, religion, and governance became the blueprint for later empires, shaping the course of human history. Rediscovering Sumer, archaeology and modern understanding. The ancient civilization of Sumer was lost to history for thousands of years, buried beneath the sands of Mesopotamia. It wasn't until the 19th and early 20th centuries that archaeologists began uncovering the remains of Sumerian cities, temples, and artifacts, revealing the profound legacy of one of the world's earliest civilizations. The rediscovery of Sumer has provided modern scholars with insights into their society, culture, technology, and influence on later civilizations, transforming our understanding of ancient history. The rediscovery of Sumer began with the exploration of Mesopotamia by European archaeologists in the 19th century. Early pioneers like Austin Henry Layard and Paul-Emile Botta focused their efforts on the ancient cities of Assyria, but their work set the stage for future excavations that would reveal even older civilizations beneath the Assyrian ruins. In the 1850s, British archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley led one of the most significant excavations at the ancient city of Ur, where he uncovered evidence of Sumerian life, including the famed royal cemetery of Ur. These tombs contained elaborate grave goods, such as gold jewelry, weapons, and musical instruments, which shed light on the wealth, artistry, and religious practices of the Sumerians. Woolley's discoveries at Ur were groundbreaking, as they revealed a civilization that predated the Assyrians and Babylonians, confirming the existence of an advanced culture that had flourished over 4,000 years ago. The artifacts found at Ur included tablets inscribed with cuneiform, the Sumerian writing system, which became a key focus for scholars attempting to decode the ancient language. Cuneiform tablets were found not only in Ur but also in other Sumerian cities like Uruk, Lagash, and Eridu. These tablets contained records of trade, legal contracts, religious hymns, and myths, providing a detailed glimpse into the daily life and beliefs of the Sumerians. The process of deciphering cuneiform was a long and meticulous endeavor that involved comparing Sumerian texts with later Akkadian and Babylonian inscriptions. Scholars like Henry Rawlinson played a crucial role in this work, using multilingual inscriptions such as the Behistun inscription to understand the structure of cuneiform. By the early 20th century, researchers had made significant progress in reading Sumerian texts, allowing historians to reconstruct Sumerian history, society, and religion. The translation of these texts revealed not only administrative and economic records, but also epic literature like the Epic of Gilgamesh, which illuminated Sumerian mythology and philosophical thought. Archaeological excavations continued throughout the 20th century, expanding our understanding of Sumerian civilization. The excavation of Uruk, one of the world's first cities, uncovered the remains of monumental architecture, including ziggurats, palaces, and city walls. The discovery of the White Temple in the Inanna district, dedicated to the goddess Inanna, confirmed the central role of religion in Sumerian society. These structures, built from mud bricks, demonstrated the Sumerians' advanced architectural techniques and their ability to organize large-scale construction projects. The city of Uruk also yielded thousands of cuneiform tablets, further enriching the knowledge base of Sumerian language and administration. As archaeologists unearthed more Sumerian sites, they also found evidence of the Sumerians' agricultural and technological prowess. Remains of irrigation canals and farming tools illustrated how the Sumerians transformed the arid landscape of Mesopotamia into fertile fields that supported their growing populations. The discovery of workshops and metalworking facilities demonstrated their skills in bronze production, pottery, and other crafts, highlighting their ability to create tools, weapons, and luxury goods. These findings confirmed the Sumerians' role as innovators in technology and urban development, and they helped scholars understand the economic foundations of their city-states. The study of Sumerian artifacts and inscriptions also provided insights into their social and political structures. The discovery of cylinder seals, for example, revealed the importance of administrative practices in Sumerian society. These small, intricately carved seals were used to mark ownership and authenticate documents, demonstrating the Sumerians' sophisticated system of property rights and commerce. The variety of scenes depicted on these seals, from religious rituals to hunting scenes, also provided a glimpse into the social and cultural life of the Sumerians, showcasing the diversity and richness of their civilization. Despite the advances made in understanding Sumerian civilization, many aspects of their society remained shrouded in mystery. One of the challenges faced by archaeologists and historians was the fragmentary nature of the evidence. The Sumerians built their cities using mud bricks, which, while readily available and functional, were not as durable as stone. Over thousands of years, many structures eroded or collapsed, making it difficult to fully reconstruct the layout and appearance of Sumerian cities. Additionally, many cuneiform tablets were damaged or incomplete, leaving gaps in the historical record that required careful interpretation and cross-referencing with other sources. The rediscovery of Sumer also raised questions about the broader influence of their civilization on neighboring regions. The extensive trade networks established by the Sumerians connected Mesopotamia to regions as far away as Anatolia, the Indus Valley, and the Persian Gulf. Archaeologists found evidence of Sumerian goods, such as pottery and lapis lazuli, in these distant locations, suggesting that the Sumerians played a significant role in early long-distance trade. This exchange of goods likely facilitated the spread of Sumerian technology, culture, and religious ideas, influencing the development of other ancient societies. Understanding these connections has become a focus for modern scholars as they seek to map out the impact of Sumer on the ancient world. The role of climate change and environmental factors in the decline of Sumer has also been an area of interest for researchers. Studies of ancient Mesopotamian climate patterns suggest that fluctuations in river levels, combined with the long-term effects of salinization from intensive irrigation, contributed to the decline in agricultural productivity that weakened the Sumerian city-states. Archaeologists have found evidence of changing river courses and abandoned irrigation canals, indicating that environmental stress played a significant role in the decline of Sumer. This understanding has led to a reevaluation of how ancient civilizations managed their resources and adapted to changing environments, offering lessons for modern societies facing similar challenges. The legacy of the Sumerians extends beyond their historical impact. It also shapes modern understanding of the development of human civilization. The rediscovery of Sumer challenged the long-held belief that civilization first arose in Egypt or the Indus Valley, revealing instead that Mesopotamia was home to some of the earliest cities and complex societies. The Sumerians' innovations in writing, law, and urban planning became central to the narrative of human progress, illustrating how early humans organized themselves and built the foundations for later empires. Today, the study of Sumerian civilization continues as archaeologists and historians work to uncover more evidence and piece together the history of this ancient culture. Technological advancements such as digital imaging, remote sensing, and satellite archaeology have opened new possibilities for exploring ancient sites and uncovering buried artifacts without disturbing the fragile remains. Scholars are also using these tools to revisit previously excavated sites, discovering new details that were missed or misunderstood in earlier excavations. As the rediscovery of Sumer unfolds, it not only enriches our understanding of the ancient world, but also highlights the resilience and creativity of one of humanity's earliest civilizations. The Sumerians' ability to build cities, develop technology, and create a lasting cultural legacy continues to inspire scholars and enthusiasts alike. Their story is a testament to the enduring power of human ingenuity and the importance of preserving our shared heritage for future generations. As we come to the end of our journey through the fascinating world of the Sumerians, we've explored the rise of their early city-states, their innovations in writing and technology, the complexity of their religious and social structures, and the challenges they face from invasions and environmental changes. From their monumental ziggurats to their epic tales like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Sumerians have left an enduring legacy that shaped the course of human history and civilization. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of one of the world's first civilizations. If you enjoyed this whispered journey through history, please make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future stories. Your support helps us continue to bring you relaxing and informative ASMR history videos. See you next time, and until then, take care and sleep well.